When you hear that there's a semi-realistic VR flight simulator available on the standalone Quest 2 and Quest 3, you tend to temper your expectations slightly, and you'd be right to do so. But Dawn of Jets did surprise me with just how high quality and experience it is, and how much can be pulled out of the Quest 3 when it comes to flight simulation. Most of my VR flight simulation experience has come in the form of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, with its highly intricate, realistic cockpits and real-world scenery, rendered in incredible detail. But that's a PC VR game, and one which really requires the highest possible spec PC you can get your hands on in order to run at a decent frame rate. So how can a VR simulator running on what is essentially a mobile phone compete? Well, of course the truth is it can't, at least not on that same playing field Microsoft Flight Simulator dominates. But what Dawn of Jets gives you is detailed cockpits of 10 real-world jet planes, various tutorials and missions for each of those aircraft, numerous challenges with leaderboards and a free flight mode. A multiplayer mode also seems to be planned in the future if the main menu isn't lying to me. I've been through the career missions of one of these aircraft so far and progressed a few into the second plane you're able to purchase. You gain money by completing these missions, which can then afford you to buy items such as bombs or eventually upgrade to a new aircraft. The game uses motion controllers and the cockpit is filled with interactive elements. The throttle, stick, instruments and weapons are all controlled using hand presence. This might not be to everyone's taste, and in general it's not really to mine. I dislike the virtual HOTAS in No Man's Sky for example, but I can tolerate it enough to get by. The controls in Dawn of Jets feel balanced about as well as a virtual stick has felt to me in a game, but for those staunchly against them, then this probably won't win you over. I did find the plane responded relatively well to the movements after I'd put in a couple of missions to get used to the sensitivity, and I can't deny that there's something immersive about having hand presence in the cockpit to flip the switch or move a dial, but perhaps we haven't quite reached the point in VR where you can get the perfect feedback from virtual sticks that many people really want. The graphical quality of the cockpit and the plane themselves is surprisingly good, but the scenery is probably the obvious place where people will be able to criticise some of the graphical fidelity. It looked sharp on Quest 3 and the performance was perfect, with barely any issues in stutters or dropped frames, even when ramping up frame rate in Quest Games Optimizer. But when you first take off, it's difficult not to notice the slightly basic landscape that you're flying through. The game mixes things up with rivers and bridges and hills and mountains, and there were even a few moments in the later missions of that first plane where I caught myself thinking it actually looked very good in certain areas, especially at higher altitudes with the clouds drifting past. But it's difficult to overlook the graphical fidelity of the landscape overall until you remind yourself this is all running on a standalone Quest. From that point of view, I do think the developers pulled as much as possible from that platform in order to give you a pretty immersive experience overall. It's fun to learn the ropes of actually getting the planes into the air, guiding them through courses before trying to nail that landing. There is combat in the game during the later challenges, it seems, with dogfighting and air superiority. There are also missions in career mode where you take down drones, balloons and drop bombs. Overall, I think Dawn of Jets is filling a nice gap in the Quest library of games. It's not the only game of its type in the store, with titles such as Warplanes and Ultra Wings 2, but it does a good job of giving a semi-realistic experience with well-modelled jets and cockpits. I'd certainly recommend it for people who don't have access to the much more in-depth Microsoft Flight Simulator, but crave that type of experience even if it comes in a much more watered-down capacity, or for those looking to get a good variety of gameplay out of a semi-realistic flight sim experience. But that's about it for me. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you'd like more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.